Reflections. Long enough ago, there dwelt within a day's journey of the city of Kyoto a gentleman of simple mind and manners, but good estate. His wife, rest her soul, had been dead these many years, and the good man lived in great peace and quiet with his only son. They kept clear of womankind and knew nothing at all of their winning or their bothering ways. They had a good steady man-servant in their house and never set eyes on a pair of long sleeves or scarlet obi from morning to night. The truth is, they were as happy as the day is long. Sometimes they labored in the rice fields, other days they went a fishing. In the spring, forth they went to admire the cherry flower or the plum, and later they set out in the view of the iris or the peony or the lotus as the case might be. At these times they would drink a little sake, and twist their blue and white tenagi about their heads and be as jolly as you please, for there was no one to say them nay. Often enough they came home by lantern light, they wore their oldest clothes, and they were mighty irregular at their meals. But pleasures of life are fleeting, more's the pity, and presently the father felt old age creeping up upon him. One night as he sat smoking and warming his hands over the charcoal, he said, "Boy, it's high time you got married." "Now the gods forbid, father. What makes you say such terrible things?" "Oh, are you joking? You must be joking."
"I am not joking at all. I never spoke a true word, and that you'll know soon enough."
"But father, I'm mortally afraid of women."
"And am I not the same? I am sorry for you, my boy."
"Then what for must I marry, father?"
"In the way of nature, I shall die before long, and you'll need a wife to take care of you."
Now the tears in the young man's eyes when he heard this, for he was tender-hearted, but all he said was, "I can take care of myself very well."
"Ah, that's the very thing you cannot,"
said his father. The long and the short of it was they found the young man a wife. She was young and as pretty as a picture. Her name was Tasso, just that, or Fusa, as they say in her language. After they had drunk down the 3 and 3 together and so became man and wife, they stood alone, the young man looking hard at the girl. For the life of him, he did not know what to say to her. He took a bit of her sleeve and stroked it with his hand. Still he said nothing and looked mightily foolish. The girl turned red, turned pale, turned red again, and burst into tears. "Honorable Tasso, don't do that, for the God's sake," says the young man.
"I suppose you don't like me. I suppose you don't think I'm pretty."
"My dear, you're prettier than the bean flower in the field. You're prettier than the little bantam hen in the farmyard. You're prettier than the rose carp in the pond. I hope you'll be happy with my father and I." At this she laughed a little and dried her eyes.
"Get on another pair of hakama and give me those you have gotten you. There is a great hole in them. I was noticing it all the time of the wedding."
Well, this was not a bad thing. This was not a bad beginning, and taking one thing with another, they got on pretty well, though of course things were not as they had been in that blessed time when the young man and his father did not set eyes upon a pair of long sleeves or an obi from morning till night. By and by, in the way of nature, the old man died. It is said he made a very good end, and left that in his strong box which made his son the richest man in the countryside. But this was no comfort at all to the poor young man, who mourned his father with all his heart. Day and night he paid reverence to the tomb. Little sleep or rest he got, and little heed he gave to his wife, Mistress Tassel, and her whimsies, or even the delicate dishes she set before him. He grew thin and pale, and she, poor maid, was at her wit's end to know what to do with him. At last she said,
"My dear, and how would it be for you if you go to Kyoto for a little?"
"And what for would I do that?" It was on the tip of her tongue to answer,
To enjoy yourself.
but she saw it would never do to say that.
Oh,
She says,
as a kind of a duty. They say every man that loves his country should see Kyoto. And besides, you might give an eye to the fashions, so as to tell me what are they like when you get home.
I've got no heart to go to Kyoto, says the young man. And if I had, it's the planting out time of the rice. And the thing's not to be done, so there's the end of it. All the same, after 2 days, he bids his wife get out his best hakama and haori and to make up his bento for a journey. I'm thinking of going to Kyoto, he tells her.
Well, I am surprised.
Says Mistress Tassel.
And what put such an idea into your head, if I may ask?
I've been thinking it's a kind of duty, says the young man.
Oh, indeed.
Says Mistress Tassel to this and nothing more, for she had some grains of sense. And the next morning, as ever, she was packing her husband off bright and early for Kyoto, and betakes herself to some little matter of house cleaning she has on hand. The young man stepped out along the road, feeling a little better in his spirits, and before long he reached Kyoto. It is likely he saw many things to wonder at. Amongst temples and places he went, he saw castles and gardens, and marched up and down fine streets, shops, gazing about with his eyes wide open and his mouth too. Very like, for he was a simple soul. At length, one fine day, he came up upon a full shop of metal mirrors that glittered in the sunshine. "Oh, pretty silver moons," says the simple soul to himself. And he dared to come near and take up a mirror in his hand. The next minute he turned as white as rice and sat him down on the seat in the shop door, still holding the mirror in his hand and looking into it. "Why, Father, how did you come here? You're not dead, then? Now the dear gods be praised. Yet I could have sworn... But no matter, since you're here, alive and well, you're something pale still, but how young you look. You move your lips, Father, and seem to speak, but I do not hear you. You'll come home with me, dear, and live with us just as you used to." You smile. That is well. "Fine mirrors, my young gentleman," said the shopman. "The best that can be made, and that's one of the best of the lot you have there. See, you are a judge." The young man clutched his mirror tight and sat staring stupidly enough, no doubt. He trembled. "How much? Is it for sale?" He wasn't a taking lest his father should be snatched from him. For sale it is indeed, most noble sir," said the shopman. "And the price is a trifle only, Tubu. It's almost giving it away I am, as you'll understand." "Tubu, only Tubu. Now the gods be praised for this mercy," cried the happy young man. He smiled from ear to ear, and he had the purse out of his girdle and the money out of his purse in a twinkling. Now it was the shopman who wished he had asked for 3 bu or even 5. All the same, he put a good face upon it and packed the mirror in a fine white box and tied it up with green cords. "Father," said the young man when he had got away with it, "before we set out for home, we must buy some gauds for the young woman there. My wife, you know." Now, for the life of him, he could not have told why, but when he came to his home, the young man never said a word to his Mistress Tassel about buying his old father for 2 bu in a Kyoto shop. That was where he made his mistake, as things turned out. She was as pleased as you like with her coral hairpins and her fine new obi from Kyoto.
And I'm glad to see him so well and so happy. But I must say he's been mighty quick to get over his sorrow after all. But men are just like children.
As for her husband, unbeknown to her, he took a bit of green silk from her treasure box and spread it in the cupboard of the tokonoma. There he placed the mirror in its white box. Every morning early and every evening late, he went to the cupboard of the tokonoma and spoke with his father. Many a jolly talk they had, and many a hearty laugh together, and the son was the happiest young man of all the countryside, for he was a simple soul. But Mistress Tassel had a quick eye and a sharp ear, and it was not long before she marked her husband's new ways.
What for does he go so often to the menagerie?
She asked herself.
And what has he got there? I should be glad enough to know.
Not being one to suffer much in silence, she very soon asked her husband these same things. He told her the truth, the young man. And now I have my dear old father home again, and I'm happy as the day is long, says he. She says. And wasn't Tubu cheap? And wasn't it a strange thing altogether? He says.
Cheap indeed. And strange. And why, if I may ask, you didn't say anything at first?
The young man grew red. Indeed, then, I cannot tell you, my dear. I'm sorry, but I don't know. And with that, he went out to his work. Up jumped Mistress Tassel the minute his back was turned, and to the tokonoma she flew on the wings of the wind and flung open the doors with a clang.
My green silk for sleeve linings. But I don't see any old father here, only a white wooden box. What can he keep in it?
She opened the box quickly.
What an odd flat shining thing,
she said, and taking up the mirror, looked into it. For a moment she said nothing at all, but the great tears of anger and jealousy stood in her pretty eyes, and her face flushed from head to chin.
A woman. So that's his secret. He keeps a woman in this cupboard. A woman. Very young and very pretty. No, not pretty at all, but she thinks herself so. A dancing girl from Kyoto. Ill-tempered too. Her face is scarlet, and oh, how she frowns, nasty little spitfire.
With that, she threw the mirror into its case and slammed to the cupboard door upon it. Herself she flung upon the mats and cried and sobbed as if her heart would break. In comes her husband. I've broken my thong sandal, and I've come to... What in the world? And in an instant he was down on his knees beside Mistress Tassel, doing what he could to comfort her and to get her face up from the floor where she kept it. What is it, my darling?
Your own darling?
Answers very fierce through her sobs, and...
I want to go home!
But my sweet, you are home. And with your own husband.
Pretty husband! And pretty goings-on with a woman in the cupboard. A hateful, ugly woman that thinks herself beautiful. And she has my green sleeve linings there with her.
What is all this about women and sleeve linings? Sure, you wouldn't grudge poor old father that little green rag for his bed. Come, my dear, I'll buy you 20 sleeve linings. At that she jumped to her feet and fairly danced with rage.
Old father! Old father! Old father! Am I a fool or a child? I saw the woman with my own eyes.
The poor young man didn't know whether he was on his head or on his heels. Is it possible that my father is gone? He said, and he took the mirror from the tokonoma. That's well. Still the same old father that I bought for Tubu. You seem worried, father. Nay then, smile as I do. There. That's well. Mistress Tassel came like a little fury and snatched a mirror from his hand. She gave but one look into it and hurled it to the other end of the room. It made such a clang against the woodwork that servants and neighbors came rushing in to see what's the matter. It's my father, said the young man. I bought him from Kyoto for 2 bu.
He keeps a woman in the cupboard who has stolen my green sleeve linings.
After this, there was a great to-do. Some of the neighbors took the man's part and some the woman's, with such a clatter and chatter and noise as never was. But settle the thing they could not, and none of them would look into the mirror because they said it was bewitched. They might have gone all the way they were till doomsday, but then one of them said, "Let us ask the Lady Abbess, for she's a wise woman." And off they went to do what they might have done sooner. Lady Abbess was a pious woman, the head of a convent of holy nuns. She was the great one at prayers and meditations and at mortifyings of the flesh, and she was the clever one nonetheless at human affairs. They took the mirror, and she held it in her hands and looked into it for a long, long time. At last she spoke. "This poor woman," she said, touching the mirror, "for it is as plain as daylight that it is a woman. This poor woman was so troubled in her mind at the disturbance that she caused in a quiet house that she has taken vows, shaved her head, and become a holy nun. Thus she is in her right place here. I will keep her and instruct her in prayers and meditations. Go you home, my children. Forgive and forget, be friends." Then all the people said, "The Lady Abbess is the wise woman." And she kept the mirror in her treasure. Mistress Tassel and her husband went home hand in hand.
"So I was right, you see, after all,"
she said. "Yes, my dear. Of course. But I was wondering how my old father would get on at the holy convent. He was never much of a one for religion.